All right, we're going to get started here. Good afternoon and welcome to the Osterville Village Library. My name is Amy Wolf and I'm the programming director here at the OVL. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to our friends joining us on Zoom, thank you for being here as well. Today we have the absolute honor of hosting local author, beekeeper, and entrepreneur, Linda P. Della Rosa. Linda was raised on Cape Cod in the 60s and chose to return in the 90s to raise her 3 children. She taught science in middle school and in high school there for 18 years before retiring to Western Massachusetts in 2017. And then eventually made it back to Cape Cod, thank goodness. While teaching, Linda became a hobby beekeeper on the land where she lived. She frequently gave presentations to children and young adults about the importance of caring for honeybees. Linda loves seeing the excitement on children's faces when they learn about honeybees and the urgent need to protect them. And before I get going, we are very fortunate to have Linda coming this Saturday to talk to children about beekeeping. She has written several children's books here available for purchase. Saturday's event is going to be a showstopper. We are very excited about it. So without further ado, Linda P. Della Rosa.
Hi. I'm going to start with telling you why I titled my presentation this. I'm a science teacher, and my first bachelor's degree was in biochemistry, and when I realized senior year that I was way too social to be in a chemistry lab all day long with a white lab coat on, I was like, nah, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I went into education. So then I had to go back to school 3 more years to get a degree in education. So I said, you know what, I want to teach science because I had so much science background. So when I was teaching chemistry around 2009 down at NASA, which was the school I graduated from, my 11th grade student said to me, will you teach us about beekeeping? We know you're a beekeeper. I said, I can't. It's not straight. I said, the end of the year, I'll tell you what, the end of the year when you're doing your final, you're all done. I'll teach you about beekeeping. You will. And I go, yeah. So I put this presentation together way back. Since then, when I retired in 2012, my husband took a job in North Carolina. Too hot. And I had to tweak this whole presentation to be North Carolina-ish. I've got a Massachusetts one and a North Carolina one. So that's how, because they said to me, why are you a beekeeper? So I said, this was how I started. This is why I'm a beekeeper. I gotta go the other way. Okay, I came up the Barnstable County Fair probably 2000. I moved back here with my children in 94. Newly divorced, back home, loved the Cape, bought a house that needed a lot of work in East Ham, moved it. So I went up to the Barnstable County Fair, and there are a bunch of beekeepers up there. And anybody who's ever seen them, they have a little booth. And I go, oh. So I signed up that next winter for a beekeeping class at night. And it was like kids all the way to old people. I was only like 50. And so that's how I got started. I was like fascinated by it. Always liked flowers anyway, but I was fascinated with being a beekeeper. These are some of my flowers. You're gonna see tons of flowers. Those are one of my honeybees. Where did they come from? Anybody knows where they came from? Because they're not native to the United States. I mean, they're not a native bee. They came over here. They came over here with the Spanish settlers. And they also came with the English colonists. We have a lot of other bees, but the honeybees were not here until that. And the Native Americans called them white man's flies. They came over with the white man.
So
What?
did they bring the bees, or did the bees, like,
Probably. I'm not sure about that. But they probably brought some with them. In boxes, I bet you they did. The pioneers tracked some of the honeybees and started putting them in boxes way back in around 1850. If you've seen pumpkins growing or squash growing, you'll probably see a honeybee down in the center of them. Because they need, in order for squash to grow, pumpkins, zucchini, all those other squashes, a honeybee or a bumblebee or some other bee has to go in and out at least 2 or 3 times to pollinate that flower. So if that flower doesn't get pollinated, it's gonna fall off and there won't be a fruit after that. So it has to be pollinated. And they use the pollen, because the pollen is protein for the baby bees. So they carry the pollen back to the hive, but they're pollinating the plants and we get the fruit. So it's like a really good, word I'm trying to think of, I'm not thinking of. It's where they kind of really benefit each other, okay? So honeybees are one of the pollinators that can't pollinate in the rain. I don't know if you know that. If it's raining, you won't see them. You'll see the bumblebees. Bumblebees are very hardy and they pollinate in the rain and no problem. If the honeybees get their wings wet, they can't fly and they're like doomed. So that's why when I talk to you later, if you have a bird bath, you should put some stones in the bird bath so they can sit on it and then they lean over and they lick the water. Because if they fall into the water, they might just be floundering around. You better pick them up and put them on a little rock because they can't get their wings wet. Okay, these are some of what honeybees do pollinate in Massachusetts. Some of you might not know about. Apples, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, cranberries, cucumbers, grapes, cherries, peaches, pumpkins and other squash, strawberries, watermelons and other melons, and alfalfa. Now, strawberries, you've probably seen strawberries, yes.
I don't see tomatoes. I was told that the only thing that pollinates tomatoes is bumblebees.
I don't know that. I don't think tomatoes have to be pollinated. I think they self-pollinate. The wind. Yeah, lavender, but tomatoes, I don't know. I'm pretty sure tomatoes don't have to be visited by a pollinator. They're one of those vegetables that the wind and they can go to them, but they don't. I'll look that up, but I don't think tomatoes, because I have my master's degree in agriculture, so I learned that answer, but I've forgotten it. I've learned that one. I know I had to learn about tomatoes way back. Pretty sure tomatoes don't have to be pollinated. They self-pollinate. By pollen just kind of moving with wind and stuff. Some vegetables don't have to be. Manually a lot of vegetables. Okay. So flowers. So I'm gonna I need flowers so bad. Flowers are begging the pollinators to come to them. How do they beg? Color, smell, and they want the pollinators to come to them so that they can reproduce. Flower can't reproduce if they don't get pollinated. So the immature seeds in a flower are down, see where that's a bumblebee. Where the bumblebee is, the seeds are down in behind that, down below, deep into the flower. So that the pollinator, whichever one it is, has to move it around and wiggle it, take the pollen back to the hive. But it goes down, the pollen goes down a tube and down into deeper part of the flower, and that becomes pollinated, fertilized. And then seeds will grow and drop to the ground naturally, and they'll be fertilized seeds for the next year. Okay, this is, some of you probably know what this is. butterfly weed, it grows wild all over Cape Cod. These are my honeybees, all over it. They go nuts over butterfly weed. They take nectar, they take pollen. So pollen is the bee's primary source of protein, nitrogen, amino acids, and fat. Pollen, pollen is little granules. I'll show you some pictures. They're little granules of protein that all the flowers produce. It's the male part of the plant. It's the DNA. It's not the end. It's protein, which are amino acids. Look it up on your phone. Yeah. It is the protein part of the flower that the honeybees and other pollinators will take back to the hive. The nectar is just sugar. So the nectar goes back as a quick source of energy, but the pollen is for them to feed their young. And I'll show you a picture. Pollen comes in all different colors depending on where they've gotten the pollen from. So nectar is mostly sugar, and they mix the nectar with a lot of things. They mix the pollen with things, and I'll talk to you about that. The pollen is used for fuel, for mussels, for the adult bees. In my story, this story, because these stories go in order, this one is teaching the young children about the jobs that a young female honeybee has to do in the hive after she's born, but before she's old enough to go out and forage. The ones that you see outside are older girls. The younger ones are in the hive. Okay. They're always working. Oh, I want to show this. If you see a honeybee around, they could be 5 miles away from where they live. They will go to people's yards, gardens, all over within 5 miles. Honeybees can only do this in the daylight. At night, they have to be back in their hive because they have to navigate back to their hive by using the sun. If they're out too long before the sun goes down, they just gotta hang out there till morning, which they usually don't. So they'll come all back to their hive, and they know their hives by smell and by direction. Even though we can't smell it. Okay, honey is the only food consumed by humans that's produced by insects. They take the nectar and they add enzymes that are in their body that they produce, and they put it in these cells. I'll show you some of the cells. They put it down into the cells, and they keep fanning it to get some of the water off, and they fan it until they get it to a certain moisture content, and they pack it over with wax to be eaten later. Worker bees, which are the girls, the boys don't work. The worker bees can fly up to 50,000 miles and tap 2 million flowers to make 1 pound of honey. That's why I only have 2 hives. I've had up to 6, but 6 is way too much for me to manage. And now that I'm getting older, it's way too much. But, and of course, for a lifetime, a worker bee would only produce a 12th of a teaspoon of honey. So that's like a long time to work for that little amount. Yeah. Yeah. That to be my old bee suit. That is my first hive down in Eastham. You can see where they started to make a shape of their own. When you give them these frames, they've got stamped on them little hexagons to help them get started, because they will design, they just know how to do this. Out of wax, they'll design a hexagon. And usually they build it out from the frame. This is a picture where they did it all on their own without using the frame as a template.
Linda, what's the yellow in the middle? Not the big thing, but
this,
Yeah,
I'll show you a better picture of that, but this is, if they're puffy, then they're drone cells, they're boys. If it's puffy, if it's flat, it's honey. I'll show you the different colors. There's usually a mixture of them on a frame. Okay, the queen is the only perfect female in the colony, and she's the true mother of them all. They, when you start out as a beekeeper, you usually buy a queen. They could be Russian queens, they could be Italian queens, different parts of the world, but they, Carolinian queens, Carolinas. I was working at North Carolina State, NC State, in the entomology department after I retired from here. And, I know they're doing a lot of work down there. I used to go to all these lectures on raising queens that were super hygienic, which means they really had the genetic makeup to keep their hive really clean. And so those are the genetics that they're trying to perpetuate in newer colonies. So if you buy Carolinian queens, usually they're ones that will work very hard to keep the hive really clean. What I mean by that is the problems that people have had in the past probably 10 years are with the varroa mites that grow. They get it, they're little tiny mites, and they get into the hive and they get on the back of their shoulders where they can't reach it. And then they work on making the bee weaker and weaker and weaker. So you have to be, as a beekeeper, you have to check every so often, especially in the summer, check to see if there's any varroa mites in your hive. And there's natural ways and chemical ways, and I never use chemical. There's chemical ways you can put things in your hive that kill those mites, but I just don't do that. I do it other ways. The queen, so you usually buy a queen that's been mated. Queens, if they're born in nature outside of the hive, they will mate with a bunch of males. In order to diversify the gene pool in the hive so that she didn't mate with just one male. So she's got her eggs have got a lot of different genetics in them. So that keeps the chances of the hive living longer because the genetic makeup is not all from one male. So you buy the queens and they come in, I'll show you a picture, they come in a little box and you have to put the queen in with your other bees and let them smell her and let them get to know her scent. And then they'll know that she's the queen. Show you what it looks like. This is like a box of bees that when I first got my bees a long time ago, I've had many different colony bees, but this was my first one. This came from Georgia and they come in a box, they come right to the post office. And they go, oh, please pick up your bees. Because they're like buzzing like really loud. And they go, oh, somebody's getting bees. And the queen is not with them. They're in a little cage. The queen is in the center there. And you put that down in with the other bees, but you don't let her out. So for a couple of days, they smell her and there's wax at this end and wax at that end. And they'll eventually eat the wax away to get her out. But it takes them a little while to do that. And then,
do they ever reject the queen?
yes. I can tell you about that. So here I am taking the thousands of bees that came in the box and I'm very carefully shaking them down into their new home. So you have in a hive, you have one bottom one that's really deep. They call it a deep. And that's where they live most of the time. And then you have another one on top of that where they live. And then you have shorter ones that are called supers, and I can tell you about that. But they stay down in these bigger ones. Now, I've got a board in here because I don't want them, because they were brand new, for other bees to get in or for them to leave. So there's only like, you want them to get used to where they're getting, it's gonna be their new home. So you put a board in here with a one little opening so that they're not gonna go in and out for a couple of days. Then you can take it out. They'll go in and out through that whole opening. Here I am still shaking them out there. And see, I have a brush there. Beekeepers, we use the brushes a lot. It's a very gentle brush to kind of just move them along, or when you want to just get them to do something very carefully, you do it. See, a lot of them are still in the box there. This is what a new frame would look like that I made. You buy all the pieces and you put them together. And then you use, these are like bobby pins. They kind of hold them a little bit on the sides. That's what you're giving them that as a base to build their. Here I am working. Here they are all over me, but they're so busy. They're not thinking about stinging me, but they're so busy. So this is a board that has a hole in it. And then this bucket has sugar water in it. And you make it a certain strength. So for them to get used to their home, and they don't really know where they are yet, because this is the C stamp, but they'll come up from here and they'll sip at this little hole. There's a little like screen on it. And then you put this empty one on top, this empty box on top. So you just let them get used to where they are for a little bit. They'll go out and forage soon enough. So then eventually, here's where I put them. And then here's not another deep, but it's kind of in between. It's called a medium. And there's that board. And then that bucket of syrup is inside there. Oh, here you put a rock on the top and put a cover on the top so animals don't knock it over. That kind of deters them a little bit. A bear, another story. I had a bear, Western Mass. Okay, we did that. Okay, the queen has been raised by when the queen has been raised by the colony, this answers your question about, if the queen is sick or they don't like her for some reason, they will make their own queen out of one of the baby bees that has been laid in there. So there's eggs in there that are laid in cells, and they have to feed them the stuff called royal jelly that they make. And the royal jelly is made from nectar and other enzymes, and it's real kind of a milky substance. And they feed that to the eggs while the egg's growing, and the egg turns into a larvae like pretty quick. And they feed it, and they keep feeding the one that they've decided to be a queen. They keep feeding it royal jelly. The other ones they feed bee bread to them. They got that too. Bee bread is like honey and pollen mixed together like a paste. So the one that they want, one of them or many, to grow bigger and fatter, and that's going to be the new queen. So they make 4 or 5 of them. That's why you have to look at your hive a lot, because you can see what they're doing. If you could see they're making queen cells, they look like a peanut shell. You know how peanut shells are just like you can see they'll put it at the bottom of one of the frames, and you go, oh, they're pissed off. They're making a new queen. Because you can tell they're making these certain kind of cells, then that usually gives her a clue something's not right with the queen. And you can tell how much the queen is laying for eggs, because she lays lots of eggs every day. And you can watch, you check like a couple times a week, you can see what she's doing. And you can see the pattern of the new eggs, and then once she lays an egg, they have to feed it for a little bit, and then once the larvae is big enough, they tap it over with wax, and then it develops inside.
They still let her stay in the hive?
Well, if she dies, they'll just kick her out. But if that's what they do with the boys. If there's too many boys that are born, They just push them out. The boys don't have stingers, so they can't defend themselves, so they can go out and try to survive on their own, but they can't sting anybody, so they can't protect themselves. So the first queen that emerges will take her stinger. She can sting multiple times. The other girl bees can only sting once, so they have a barbed stinger. So if they sting you, you know that they've been so threatened that they think you're gonna kill them, they'll sting you. They won't unless they really feel threatened, because their whole back end just pulls right out, really bad. So the queen doesn't have a barbed stinger, she can just sting away. And so she will sting all the other queen cells that were near her, because she emerged first. So that's it, getting rid of the competition. Then she will take flight and leave the hive and mate with a bunch of drones outside the hive. Then she comes back. Okay, after she's fertilized in flight, she remains that for the rest of her life, about 3-4 years. That's what they usually live, 3-4 years. Whereas the other honeybees don't live that long. She'll lay between 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day from January to November. Very early in the spring, she lays very sparingly. She lays most rapidly when fruit and flowers are bloom and bees are getting pollen and nectar. She's larger than the worker, but not as large as a drone. I'm going to show you the difference in the size of the. Her abdomen is tapered to a point, and I'll show you that. She
And
does
that's
a stinger.
because that she was found this royal.
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Wow.
The male bees don't have a stinger and don't have any means of gathering nectar, secreting wax, or doing any work that is necessary to support the hive. The purpose is to mate with the queen. After he mates with the queen, he dies. Only 1 in 1,000 get to mate with the queen. Drones are kept around the hive in case they're needed. They eat food that's stored in the cells. They loaf around the hive until around September. As the nectar flows become less and less, they're kicked out of the hive to die. The drones are larger, and I'll show you a good picture. And there's a cute, in the first story, she meets the drone, and he's just sitting there on a thing, and he's swinging his leg. And she says to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I don't have a stinger like you, and I'm just hanging out." And he's swinging his legs. He's got his red socks, knee socks on, and his red socks baseball cap. Okay, so my question to you is this a drone, a worker bee, or a queen? What do you guess?
There's no stinger.
I mean, you can't really see, but that's good, it sounds stinger. The drones are much bigger. That's definitely a worker, because the queen most likely would not be out there. The queen stays in the hive unless, she's a brand new queen and she has to go out and mate with a bunch of males. She, if you see one out on a flower, it's an older girl, not a young one. Workers are underdeveloped females. They're not as big like the queen. They do all the work. They actually work themselves to death. They secrete wax. They ventilate the hive. They gather pollen. They feed and rear the brood. They make honey for all, and they defend the colony. And that's all in the second story, except when they forage is in the last story, because the oldest girls forage. They work themselves to death in 6 to 8 weeks. They love sunflowers. That is near my house in upstate New York. When we first moved, we moved to upstate New York. And they love sunflowers. Okay, we're still talking about the girls. Their abdomen is shorter than the queen, smaller in diameter. They have a barbed stinger. And they will sting if they have to defend the hive. Then they die because the stinger pulls to the bottom out. Okay, here's the good picture I wanted to show you. Here's the big difference. The drone is pretty big. Not as big as the queen. The queen is much longer. Lots of eggs in there, and that's the worker bee. They have different parts. Didn't have to really do that, but those are all the different parts. The brood is what are considered all the babies that they're rearing. They're found in the combs of the brood nest, the body of the hive. I'll show you a picture of that. The sealed worker brood has a yellow to tan appearance. I'll show you a picture so you can tell the difference. The drone brood is rounded. And the capped honey cells are white on the top and flat. Here we go. So, this is worker brood, kind of flat. Here's where they're working on honey, wet in there, they're fanning it to get some of the water out. This is little granules of pollen, which will be all different colors, depending on where they got it from. This is capped honey, very different. You can see the honey under it, and it's kind of thinner wax. There's the drone puffy brood there. And then what you do is you check your hive every once in a while. You can see what they're doing. You can see usually the queen lays in a pattern, stays on one rack. She'll stay for a while and then she'll go to another one. 3 days after the egg is laid, it becomes a grub or larva, and they're all fed royal jelly just for 3 days. After the 3 days, only the queen is fed the royal jelly. Told you that. Cells filled with growing larvae for 5 to 6 days and is closed by the bees with a wax cap. They make their own wax. They have a wax like organ in their body, and it's down on their like sides of their legs, not near their pollen sacs, but not far down. And they take the wax out and then they spit it out of their mouth and then they cover it over. Here's some of the tools that we use. That's a smoker, you guys have probably seen those. You put either special smoking fuel or small pieces of paper in it, and you get it to smoke in there, and you use this bellow to kind of get it going. And with the smoke, when you want to go into the hive, you smoke around the hive so that they think there's a fire nearby, and then they all go down. And they all go down, and it calms them actually. And so you do that when you're gonna go in there to check something. And you don't ever go in at night, because that would tick them off. And you don't go in if it's been raining. Learn a big lesson there. It was raining in the morning when I first learned this a long time ago. And it was not raining. And I went in, it was like noon, but it was not raining. And the minute I took the top off, I heard the loud buzzing, it's a different kind of sound. And they were like, mad. And they all just started hitting my face that I was there. But they just wanted to get me, like, no, you shouldn't have opened it up. And so my husband had to close me down for water because they wouldn't leave me alone. They were mad. This is the brush I showed you. You use it's a very gentle brush, and you usually just kind of move them along, or if you're cleaning off something. This is a really good tool. We just call it a hive tool. It's like a little pry bar, so you can move things that are stuck together. This is so you can hook it under and pull something up. It's a very handy tool. There's a smoker going. This is at what the bottom of the hive looks like. See, there's a screen. It's called a screen bottom board. And so air, and you put it up on cinder blocks, so air can go up into the hive, but no animals can go up in there. So it's way down at the bottom. So here the board's been taken out so they can come in and out freely. This is on a hot day. This is where they live, the two big deeps. And they're all out here because it's hot in there. So they call this bearding, like a beard. And it's hot, so they're out and they're fanning the hive. They go over and they take water. Here they are sipping water on the edge of my old bird bath. They're sitting on the edge just sipping. They go back to the hive and they fan the hive. They need water all the time. There's my two hives. Okay, the kids used to say to me, why do you do it? Because it's an old saying because it's the right thing to do. If people don't take care of the honeybees, they're just not gonna be here. And they do need being taken care of. And I'm doing it so everybody can have a garden, pretty much, within 5 miles. So beekeepers, some beekeepers that are big and they do it to sell their honey, that's, a lot of them do it to make money, right? I'm just doing it to help people's yards, my yard. And, so I have really good pollinated vegetables. And for me, it's my coffee. Yeah, questions? Nobody have any questions? Would you find